Doug Weiss put himself up to leave Joni Lamb with millions of dollars in assets, real estate, and continuing income in just 3 years of marriage. 3 years, everyone. 3 years. Doug Weiss went from being a struggling counselor pleading for TV airtime money to co-owning at $2 from the moment he married Joni in June 2023 to her death in May 2026. His heart-to-heart counseling seminars are broadcast on Daystar for free, earning millions of dollars in advertising. He also owns a $9 million beach condo in Florida, is on the deed of Joni's lake house property, and may be in Joni's revocable trust that oversees her $11.7 million real estate empire. What's the best part? Lisa Weiss and Doug remain business partners. Therefore, the Weiss family benefits from the Daystar money, the publicity, and the property. This was not a union. This was a successful corporate acquisition. We'll discuss how Doug Weiss positioned himself through real estate transactions, how much he made in just 3 years, and why these were the most lucrative 3 years of his life. Because Doug Weiss won by playing the long game, you know. Now let's get started. Let me start by defining Doug Weiss's pre-marriage status with Joni Lamb. In Colorado Springs, Doug was the director of Heart to Heart Counseling Ministries. He sold online courses, produced books, provided counseling, and gave speeches. Here's the issue, though. In order to expand his firm, Doug required TV exposure, and TV airtime is costly. Doug said that he prayed for money to purchase TV slots. He received a contribution, although it was short-lived. Depending on the network and time slot, purchasing Christian TV airtime might be from $10,000 to $50,000 per month. Doug was therefore stuck. He ran a counseling practice, but he was unable to grow without exposure to television. He was unable to reach millions. He was unable to earn actual money. At that point, Marcus Lamb passed away, leaving Joni defenseless, alone, and in need of assistance. Doug recognized the chance. Just 18 months after Marcus's death, in June 2023, Doug wed Joni. At the time, Joni had 7 properties totaling $11.7 million spread across 4 states, a multi-million-dollar Christian TV empire, Daystar television network revenue sources, a salary, speaking engagements, books, and more. Doug brought a lot of ambition along with a counseling practice. Additionally, sources claim that Daystar and Joni's assets were protected by a prenuptial agreement. But as we'll see, Doug managed to get past that prenuptial agreement. Let me now demonstrate the real estate transactions that took place throughout Doug and Joni's 3-year marriage. These documents are available to the public. This isn't conjecture. This is true. The first transaction was the $2.9 million Florida beach condo. Date, March 12, 2026, 2 months prior to Joni's passing. Unit 1020, Grand Dunes 2 condo, Miramar Beach, Florida. $2.9 million was the purchase price. Bought in September of 2023. What took place? Although the land was moved from Joni Trammell Lamb into Joni Lamb's revocable trust, the deed indicates that Weiss, Douglas, and Lamb now possess the property. Do you see that, everyone? The trust bears Doug Weiss's name. Doug's name is now on a joint trust for this $2.9 million seaside condo. Doug is therefore legally entitled to this property. The second transaction was the lake house in Granbury, Texas. Property located on the Brazos River at 3452 Abe's Landing Drive in Granbury, Texas. $814,000 was the original value. On August 18, 2025, it was sold. What matters? Doug's name appeared on this deal as a co-owner, according to conversations about real estate transactions. Doug held a portion of the property when it was sold in August 2025, despite the fact that Joni had owned it before to their marriage. The property in Georgia is the third transaction. Date, March 25, 2026, just then 2 months prior to Joni's passing. A $365,000 property in Macon, Georgia. What took place? The property was put into Joni Lamb and Lamb's revocable trust. On March 11, 2026, this trust was established. Only a few weeks before Joni passed away, a brand new trust was established. This is the crucial part. Prior to March 11, 2026, there was no trust. Just weeks before she passed away, Joni established a brand new revocable trust, into which properties began to be transferred. Is Doug a beneficiary of that trust, I wonder? Because if he is, when Joni passes away, he will have access to everything in it. Let me now describe how Doug could have used the trust method to get around the prenuptial agreement. Generally, a prenuptial agreement safeguards your premarital assets. This is the loophole, though. The prenuptial agreement does not apply to assets moved into a joint trust during a marriage. This is what seems to have occurred. First, in June 2023, Doug marries Joni under a prenuptial agreement. Step 2. Joni begins moving assets into a new revocable trust during the marriage. In the third step, Doug's name is added to the trust as a beneficiary or co-trustee. Step 4. Doug may be among the beneficiaries who receive the trust assets upon Joni's death. Step 5. Since the assets are in the trust rather than Joni's own name, the prenuptial agreement is meaningless. This is a legitimate method of giving money to a spouse without going against a prenuptial agreement. And it appears that's just what took place. Let me now figure out how much Doug Weiss probably made during his 3 years of marriage to Joni Lamb. Direct property assets include a $2.9 million beachfront condo in Florida and a joint trust in Doug's name. The amount from the sale of the Granbury Lake house is unclear. Doug was a co-owner. Access to residual properties valued at $8.8 million is available to potential trust beneficiaries. Doug receives at least $2, based on a conservative estimate. The Florida condo is worth $9 million. Doug is likely to receive between $5 and $7 million in cash and property. Heart-to-Heart Counseling became a Daystar original, free Daystar airtime, and indirect business benefits. $500,000 to $1 million in free advertising annually. $1.5 million to $3 million in free exposure over 3 years. Daystar exposure and higher counseling revenue translate into additional clients. Each intensive from Heart-to-Heart costs between $4,000 and $15,000. Daystar exposure increased the clientele and generated $500,000 to $1 million in income annually. Doug's awareness was enhanced by the Daystar platform, book sales, and speaking. An additional $100,000 to $300,000 annually. $2 to $4 million in indirect benefits over a 3-year period. The conservative estimate for the total is $4.9 million. $9 to $11 million is a likely estimate. If Doug is the primary beneficiary of the trust, the maximum estimate is $15 million or more. Doug Weiss placed himself up to make between $10 and $15 million in assets, revenue, and business advantages in just 3 years. And keep in mind that Lisa Weiss and Doug are still business partners. Thus, both of them gain from the Heart-to-Heart funds. Let's go back to the prenup subject now. Joni informed Susie and Jonathan about the prenup. Doug is opposed to Daystar. He's safe. But it's evident when you look at these real estate deals. Doug managed to get around any prenuptial agreements. How? Prenuptial agreements do not protect property transfers made during a marriage. Prenup is circumvented via trust creation and trust assets. Doug's name is added to properties under joint ownership. According to Texas community property law, all assets acquired during a marriage are jointly owned. Therefore, either Joni lied to Jonathan, there was no prenup, or the prenup had flaws. Doug took advantage of them. Doug was paid in any case. Here's what folks should know. Lisa Weiss and Doug remain business partners. They continue to run Heart-to-Heart counseling together even after the divorce. Thus, Heart-to-Heart received publicity when Doug received Daystar exposure. Doug and Lisa both gain financially from Heart-to-Heart's increased clientele. Doug and Lisa both get money when Heart-to-Heart sells books, classes, and intensives. Thus, the Weiss family benefited from this as well as Doug. Consider it. Doug receives $2 in property.